added to the roster, and has Zach Wilson been mismanaged with the Jets? We'll discuss. But first, here are today's headlines.
The BYU football roster shakeup continues. Yes, Clark Barrington is the most recent BYU Cougar to announce he is entering the portal. Right now, he's listed as a top 10 overall prospect in the portal, according to some outlets. Isaac Rex made it official that he is coming back to BYU for one more year at the tight end position. And Corbin Green, freshman defensive back, joins Talon Tongiai, freshman offensive lineman, entering the transfer portal. Both announced on their respective social medias. Other football news from BYU, Ben Bywater had successful shoulder surgery yesterday.
It's men's hoops ball night against Lindenwood. Ball night! Cougars are on a season-high 3-game win streak. Pregame is on BYUtv and BYU Radio at 8 Eastern.
BYU women's basketball drops to 0-2 in West Coast Conference play. Tough slate when you have to start at Gonzaga and at Portland. They lose to the Pilots last night, 67-45. Not the only setback. Lauren Gustin's double-double streak broken at 11 games when she finished with 12 points and 8 rebounds. Up next, Monmouth tomorrow, 3 Eastern, 1 Mountain on the BYUtv app.
Women's soccer signs UCLA transfer Ellie Walbrook. She played for the national champs last season. An average of 20 minutes off the bench, scored 1 goal on 9 shots. She's from Highland, Utah. Went to American Fork. Welcome back.
Zach Wilson has been officially announced as the New York Jets starting quarterback for Thursday Night Football against Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars. How about that matchup? The 1 and 2 picks from the same draft class. Mike White of the Jets still has not received medical clearance as he comes back from a rib injury.
Softball signs Texas Tech transfer Brianna Breezy Hayward, who's on the Red Raiders roster in 2022 but did not play. In high school, the infielder batted .720 and had 25 homers in 2 seasons in Tucson, Arizona.
BYU women's volleyball finishes the rankings at number 18 this season, losing, of course, to 4th-ranked Pitt in the NCAA tournament in the second round. The team will be back and strong once again with a fantastic recruiting class. They've had 35 NCAA tournament appearances overall, of course, made a couple of Final Fours in the last decade. BYU finishes the season overall 22-7, 14-3 in West Coast Conference play. All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending. And it is presented by Bodyguards, protection for a life worth living. Learn more at bodyguards.com. It is decision day, week, certainly decision time for specifically BYU quarterback Jaren Hall. Our question today is, does his decision need to be today for the best interest of Jaren and BYU football, one or the other, or both?
The best interest of Jaren is on his timeline. He's got time. The best interest of BYU is that he makes the decision weeks ago and tells BYU so that they can get another guy in here. We are aware that there are interested P5 quarterbacks that have come to town and want to play at BYU potentially. One of those committed to another school yesterday. We'll see if that's where that guy ends up going, depending on how things shake out. But certainly there are interested, talented quarterbacks that want to play at BYU, P5, JUCO, and otherwise. Excited about whatever happens the next couple of days. I said like a month or two ago, I'm not worried BYU is going to get a good quarterback. And we are excited that that is going to be the case. That might be Jaren Hall. Probably not. I think he's gone. But for BYU, certainly the Cougars don't want to put any undue pressure on him because you want him to come back. But you also don't want to have a guy feel bad if he doesn't. So there's sort of a unique situation there in how you approach that with Jaren at this point. Like Tyler Rogier, certainly we wanted Tyler back, but I get the sense that maybe he felt bad that he told BYU that he left, but it obviously was the right move.
No, because he's a great person. He didn't want to disappoint anybody, but there was undue pressure put on him like, oh, well, if you don't come back, you're letting down an entire football community. Like, we got to get away from
the last time we told that was Chris Burgess, right? That didn't go well. Yeah, it's just, hey, we needed to make a decision soon, I think would probably be just the good question there for Jaren. But yeah, does he need to make a decision soon? I would hope he makes it like today, honestly, so that BYU can push forward with whoever the next guy is, if he's leaving. Now, I assume he's leaving. But his dad was just named the head coach at Maple Mountain, so the family was dealing with kind of that news over the weekend too. So it's a busy time in the Hall household.
Here's what I don't want to happen is Jaren Hall, yes, to be browbeaten somehow into feeling like he has to come back. Because I'm looking at and this is my perspective, I've not had the conversation with Jaren Hall. We didn't talk about it when we were in New Mexico. We talked about the BYU football team and the game approaching and the backup quarterbacks. No conversation about the NFL draft. But from my outside perspective, I can't see a better scenario for Jaren Hall with his current pro draft stock. What would it take to get his pro stock higher? It would take something special next season. And by special, I mean like he's a top 4 quarterback in the country, throws for 3,500 yards.
But now you're playing a P5 schedule. Like, you're not going to put up the numbers.
And it's asking a lot.
You're going to throw more picks. You're going to be sacked more often. Probably.
So we're saying, okay, Jaren, essentially play, and I know I compare hit situations to golf a lot, but play a more difficult golf course and score better, okay? Simple, right?
I've said the weight room thing.
Score better.
Yeah, get the same amount of reps up with more weight. No, it takes time to get to that point.
He could do it. It's possible. He's veteran enough that like he could do it.
Yeah.
But the chances of it happening, understandably, are less because it's just going to be a more difficult schedule.
He should go pro. Just tell us.
The risk-reward scenario is clearly, in my opinion, in favor of Jaren like utilizing his window now.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want, what he doesn't want, what BYU fans don't want, and what I don't want is for him to come back and feel like he has to play timid because he's worried about his future career. Like, oh man, I can't have a devastating injury. That's good for nobody. It's not good for Jaren. It's not good for BYU. It's not good for the fan base. You shouldn't have to feel like, well, I got to protect myself, so I'm not going to run here. I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm not going to sell out and make this play. It's not a good scenario. Like, if he's worried about that and he's had an injury past, like, go. You've done enough. If you are number 6 on Mel Kiper's quarterback list, your best available quarterbacks, number 6 has him, we think, at worst, projected as a 4th, maybe 5th round draft pick. How much better is it going to get for Jaren Hall outside of, like, being a Heisman finalist?
Therefore, go.
And doing something crazy, and maybe he slides into, like, the 2nd or 3rd round?
Yeah, therefore, go. Jaren's been awesome. I need to look this up again, but I'm pretty sure, has he beaten the most P5 teams of anybody?
Yes.
Okay, so he's unique in that way. 2021 was spectacular. 22 fought through some injuries, had some really amazing throws on film, some really nice performances, played more aggressive with his legs at Boise State. That helped win that game when BYU was able to run the ball that way, and had some real injuries at that position where he had to make up for some of that. Yeah, the time is great. Jaren's been awesome. No one's going to feel weird if he leaves.
Right.
Like, it's great. And even if they do, who cares? Jaren's not the kind of guy that really cares what other people think. He doesn't feel the need to appease a group, I don't think. I think he feels the need to do the right thing for him and his family. Yeah, great. Would it be better for BYU if he came back? I'm not sure, because he's awesome. BYU's going to bring in another quarterback that's awesome. I think you pick it up. That'd be like saying, I don't know if Zach Wilson should leave. It's like, well, Jaren Hall's sitting there. Another very capable guy is sitting there for BYU, which is very exciting. And so if Jaren leaves, it's not devastating. When Tyler left, it was like, okay, we got Chris Brooks. Chris certainly wasn't everything we were hoping he'd be. He was good.
We felt like BYU has everybody else. You got Jaren Hall and Puka Nacua and everybody else, the whole offensive line, they're all coming back. Tyler can go, we'll be okay.
We'll be okay. And they weren't at running back as much as we were hoping. Chris was good. He wasn't as good as we thought, but he was serviceable for sure, and serviceable plus. But yeah, Jaren should go, and he should tell us soon. Can you tell us now, Jaren?
Yeah. Does it need to be today? I mean, we're asking, like, does it need to be today?
I would like it to be today.
Yeah, we would like. It doesn't have to be today, but
I don't want one of these guys going elsewhere, potentially.
Well, and one quarterback the BYU had on the radar has now officially announced for another program, which has now elevated this conversation into what we're discussing today.
A little more urgent. Just because you commit to that school, by the way, and even sign something, doesn't mean you actually have to go there. We've learned.
Yes.
So it's about enrollment at that school.
If Jaren Hall can come back and play like we know he's capable of playing, with full confidence, not timid, not having to, like, protect himself, and maybe that deals with Aaron Roderick feeling better about a backup quarterback that's more capable coming in if Jaren gets hurt, fine, then that, like, frees them up. Great. But I don't want him to feel like he has to play at 80% of what he's capable of because he's got to hold back worried about getting hurt and hurting his future stock.
Yeah, I don't think he's come back, so I don't think that'll be a problem.
he is either, but if he does, I want him to be able to be super healthy and play to the full extent of his capabilities.
Yeah. Okay, topic 2. Were you surprised, shocked by the Clark Barrington entering the transfer portal news?
A little bit. I thought Clark was going to try and go pro this year, and I thought his draft stock was good enough that he could be a late-round pick. And so I just had kind of already put him in the category of, oh, Clark is probably going to be a late-round draft pick, and he's going to be gone from BYU anyway.
He'll be gone.
Yeah. So this one is surprising because he still wants to play in college, and one can't help but think he probably wants to follow his brother to Baylor. I don't know.
And
That's
Grimes and Mateos.
Purely speculative, in as far as it goes right now. But
it's a rational thought, given that his brother went to Baylor.
The brothers want to go. They used to play for Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes, and don't be shocked if they end up together. But that's the surprising part is he's going to play more, and it's not at BYU. That hurts. But I had already put him in the NFL with Blake Freeland and Jaren Hall and Puka Nacua. So, yeah, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt as much as it would if we were fully expecting him to come back to BYU. So, yeah, shocked? No. Surprised a little bit that he's going to play one more year. I think he's got a pro grade right now. He'd go pro if he wanted to right now.
Yeah, The Athletic put out an article that said he's one of the top 10 players in the portal. I mean, he's started 40 games. He's NFL good. He's got an NFL-type mustache. I mean, he's awesome. I wish he was coming back at BYU. Or if he's going pro, great. Because if he goes somewhere else, then he gets drafted. It's not a BYU draft pick. You know what I mean? This has been our guy. But the Barrington brothers, Clark and Campbell, leaving is a bummer because these guys are really good. Now, these two and now, a notable local recruit going elsewhere that was perhaps coming to BYU. Some people have asked some questions about that position group and Daryl Funk and whatever. I'm not overly concerned about that. Is it on my radar at the moment? Like, yo, what's going on? Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not reacting like most people are on Twitter relative to that position or whatever. The hope is that, BYU can continue to develop these guys, which are really good. BYU had a stellar offensive line this year. We were hoping it'd be good enough to maybe produce another win or two in third and fourth down short situations. It did not. That was disappointing. That's kind of the only disappointing part. Didn't give up a ton of sacks this year. Run game was better than you thought. There were some execution issues in certain games, though, in short yardage, as I mentioned. But, yeah, I was surprised, and I'm a little concerned. I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned at the moment. But we expect Blake Freeland to bounce, Clark Barrington at left guard in the portal, Connor Pay at center going to return. Right guard was Harris LaChance. Harris is probably gone.
Is coming back.
Kingsley will move over to starting left tackle next year. Braden Kime probably slots into that right tackle spot.
Salatai is a beast.
Salatai is a big-time player. BYU's got some capable guys, that are going to fit in there. They'll sign some guys as well. They'll bring in some transfers at that position as well, which we're super excited about tomorrow's show, by the way, with signing day. So tomorrow's signing day. It's going to be exciting. And typically, BYU has kind of known who they're going to get, but they're going for more guys and more talented guys at certain positions to where it's coming down to the wire. They may not get as many as they normally do, but they're being more aggressive in that pursuit in the Big 12. So I'm excited. We've got a list of guys they expect to sign. We'll see who they do sign, and we'll give them to you tomorrow during the hour that we're live.
Well, and BYU can't announce some of them until others make decisions. Right? At the quarterback position specifically. So if Jaren Hall makes a decision today, then there could be a possible decision from another quarterback tomorrow and an announcement on recruiting day.
Yeah.
But if Jaren holds off, then that's not going to happen tomorrow. This is the situation that BYU is dealing with.
And that's why there's some urgency there. Obviously, you would love if Jaren Hall, in the next, 80 seconds or so. Like, ideally, you would know today, and then you can lock in that guy or guys. And like we've talked about, BYU has some really high-profile P5s interested, and, JUCO quarterbacks interested as well. So let's go.
You know what? You can't help but wonder who in the world the starting quarterback is going to be when BYU takes on Sam Houston State in how many days?
Countdown to Sam Houston.
257. 257 days away from Sam Houston State at BYU, opening up the Cougars' inaugural campaign as a Power 5 team.
It's two dudes against each other. Brigham Young versus Sam Houston. Someone tweeted at me over the weekend. I can't remember what day or who. I'll have to look it up. But they said, I'll give you an NIL deal to stop doing the countdown. Name your price. So I think you, me, and Ben need to chat. So we might cash in.
Well, does that apply to all countdowns? Because we also have a countdown to the Big 12 that we could potentially roll out. Not to mention the countdown to Sam Houston State, which we just debuted on the show.
Samuel.
Let's hear from you in Voice of the Nation before we take our first break with our question of the day. What BYU football news are you most anticipating? Is the decision that Jaren Hall will make to come back for one more year or go pro? Is it the awaiting coaching hires? We need some more announcements on the defensive side of the ball specifically. Who are those guys going to be?
Yeah.
Does it deal with signing day? How good is BYU's signing day class going to be? Who's going to be involved there?
What's your answer here? Because this is mine right here.
Or is it more about the
Jaren's
transfer
decision.
portal? Nice.
That's mine.
Well, yes. I mean, we just talked about it. We made it top of mind for us today. Yeah, it's the
top
quarterback
of mind with
decision.
Julie Rose, BYU Radio.
That affects signing day in a way, and maybe it'll
100%.
affect transfer portal in a way, Jaren, because if BYU gets Jaren back or locks in somebody else, that might affect the decisions that other players are going to make in the transfer portal.
If I'm sure, I don't know, but BYU's probably been like, hey, Jaren, love you, would love to have you back. Also, we'd love to know soon because we need to move on or not. Whatever you decide will be great.
At J_Royal09 on Twitter answers with this, quote, Jaren Hall's future is the first domino that needs to fall.
Sure.
I know that decisions like this shouldn't be taken lightly, but he needs to decide quickly to come back or not so that the coaching staff can get their quarterback from the portal sooner if they need to. Hashtag BYUSN.
Certainly, Jaren has been thinking about this for months. Like, the players act like, oh, I didn't decide till after the year. No, I've been thinking about it.
Clearly, the worst case scenario is BYU.
It's just finding that exact decision.
Is waiting, and then another quarterback leaves, and then it's like,
I was told that a certain BYU player was waiting for a draft grade and would not get it until Thursday or Friday this week. So I don't know if that's for all players, but I don't know if we're going to have to wait until this weekend.
Maybe that applies to Jaren,
But that's for one player, I was told that was the case.
Hashtag BYUS on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to join the conversation.
It's a ball night for men's hoops. They host Lindenwood out of St. Charles, Missouri. First ever meeting between these two programs. BYU Sports Nation game day begins at 8 Eastern on BYUtv.
Up next, ESPN college football insider and expert Trevor Matich on the Jaren Hall situation. Does he feel the urgency for that decision? And how does a bowl win change the way he looks at the season? He'll tell us next on BYU Sports Nation.
Accidents don't just happen 9 to 5. They happen when you least expect them. The team at Siegfried & Jensen is here for you 24/7. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour. Really here for you. No matter when you call us, you'll speak to a real person and have access to the same expertise and personal attention as always, and get the legal help you need when you need it. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour, 24/7.
Learn more at siegfriedandjensen.com.
Moving your family doesn't have to be stressful. Not when you use Bailey's Moving and Storage. For 65 years, we've moved families, companies, and busy individuals like you across town and across the country. From planning to unpacking, families have trusted Bailey's for many years to be their partner every step of the way. Whether it's local, long distance, international, an office move, or more, be sure to begin with Bailey's. The official mover of BYU Athletics, Bailey's Moving and Storage. More than just a move.
Introducing the Truck for Adventure. The all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier doesn't compromise on power or comfort. This midsize truck was redesigned to incorporate the latest technology and designs for safety, comfort, and convenience. Plus, with up to 6,700 pounds of towing capacity and best-in-class horsepower, it's rugged enough for adventure and still safe enough to transport all your favorite people. Where's your new Frontier? You'll find it at Tim Dowling Nissan Southtown and South Jordan.
Do you ever feel small?
3, 2, 1, go!
Have regrets? I guess we all have them. And trust. That's tough to earn or regain.
You are the winner of Survival!
Glad we're doing this.
New Mexico Bowl champion. BYU football finishing the season 8-5 thanks to some heroics from Sol-Jay Maiava, Ben Bywater, Jacob Robinson.
We were just going with Bowl J. I thought
that's true. Bowl J.
That's how we roll now with Sol-Jay.
Welcome back. We're live in Studio B. This is your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I am Spencer Linton, Jarom Jordan to my left, and now joining us is our good friend and longtime contributor to this program, ESPN College Football Insider. Typically, he does Matich Mondays. It is a Matich Tuesday with ESPN's Trevor Matich. Trevor.
A Trevor Tuesday, if you will.
Oh, nice. I like that play on words. How is your Tuesday going thus far?
It's a great Tuesday. It's a whole lot better because of the big win in the bowl game. I mean, a lot of people didn't expect that, but that makes Tuesday a whole lot better.
Understandably. How much different do you view the season based on what BYU did, yes, in the bowl game with the victory over SMU, but the way that BYU finished the season after the winless October?
It changes everything, doesn't it? I mean, they go 0-4 in October, then they finish out the season 4-0. And the thing is, they had all kinds of excuses to let the wheels come off of this thing, but instead they came together and they fought and they finished strong. And the way they finished was impressive. I mean, with Jaren Hall being banged up in those last two games against Stanford, they put it on the offensive line, and the offensive line just pounded away. And then in the bowl game, same way. They said, look, we're going to throw the ball a half a dozen times. We'll see what happens, or we'll complete a half a dozen anyway. And we're just going to pound the ball. And how did they respond? They responded by rising to the occasion, by being that physical group that we had hoped they would be all season long. The defense, especially in that bowl game, with all the new coaches and all the different things they were doing, all the different attacking that they were doing, the defense rose to the occasion and made play after play against one of the best offenses in the country. And I think you have to look at this season from a standpoint of what did they do at the end under adversity? And what they did was exactly what you would hope they would do in a perfect scenario.
And you hope that in the future, BYU can somehow figure out how to not be so injured so that they can have most of their best players out there. Because BYU at the beginning of the year was a very different squad than BYU at the end of the season. And yes, they win 4 in a row, and they win 8, and that was great. Nice finish to the season. How would you summarize this year, given the expectations at the beginning, given the 4-5 first 9, and then given the last 4 wins?
Overall, it did not go as expected. I thought this was a 10 or 11 win team, even with the schedule that they had. The injuries played a part in it. Lack of execution played a part in it. Sometimes they ran into a buzzsaw. They ran into teams that were just hot at the wrong time for the Cougars. And so if you look at it from a standpoint of total wins over the season, it's not what I had hoped. It's not what a lot of people expected. But again, you look at it from a standpoint of the seasons of the season. Started great, then it became disastrous. Then it finished strong. And I think that the way it finished builds the culture and gives them momentum going into the offseason. So I can't say that the season is the success that it should have been from a record standpoint, but I think you can say that going into the offseason, they have to feel very good.
Trevor Matich of ESPN with us on BYU Sports Nation. Let's turn our attention to Jaren Hall and decision time for the BYU quarterback. Trevor, in your opinion, what do you think Jaren Hall should do, and when should he make that decision?
He should go to the NFL, and he should make that decision about 2 weeks ago. Because his first priority, his first responsibility is to his family. He's married. He's got a young child. He's got to make sure he does the right thing by his family first. But at the same time, the longer he delays, the more it puts his teammates, or maybe former teammates, at a disadvantage, maybe a massive disadvantage. And so while I don't think that it's fair to put pressure on him to say, you got to make the decision right now, he's got to make the decision when it's best for his family. But at the same time, part of what factors into the timing of his decision needs to be the people that are relying on that decision, people that have been so good to him over the last several years at BYU. So the decision should have already been made. I'm not sure what information he's waiting on. Maybe there's an NIL deal that may get him to stay, and maybe he's waiting on the conclusion of that. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe there's more information coming in from the NFL, although I don't know what that might be. Because right now, when you look at where he would be in the NFL, he'd probably be about a mid-round, maybe late-round draft choice. And at worst, he would be on a practice squad making a couple $100,000 a year while he develops. Now, at best, he'll get drafted and he'll be higher than people expect, and he'll go in and make a roster, and he'll come out his rookie year and do great things. But at the same time, I think the best risk-reward balance for him right now is to leave. And if you're going to get hurt while you're playing for an NFL contract. Hopefully you won't get hurt, and he will be able to move on from there. That, to me, is the best thing, and the decision is to be made about 2 weeks ago.
Starting left guard and stalwart the last couple of years, Clark Barrington last night entered the transfer portal. His brother Campbell has already entered and committed to go to Baylor following Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos. Any concern about the Barringtons leaving?
Well, you don't get better with those guys leaving, right? But at the same time, this is an offensive line that's got a lot of depth. They've played a lot of guys, different guys at different positions, and they're going to be fine on the offensive line next year. They'll be more than fine on the offensive line next year. It does surprise me that Clark is leaving, just because left tackle Blake Freeland looks like he is going to the NFL. And I think that Clark Barrington really ought to be playing left tackle in his final year in college. And I thought this was the place to do it. He could just slide out and play left tackle in the same system, because physically he's got the build of an NFL left tackle much more than guard. But at the same time, if his brother wants to go and he wants to play a year in college with his brother, there's a lot to be said for that, because how often do you get to play with your brother on a major college football team? So that is that's a big deal. A lot of things that we don't know. We don't know what kind of NIL has been promised relative to collectives. We don't know when teams, when players transfer. A lot of things could be happening behind the scenes, just besides there's something wrong with the program that they're leaving. A lot of things could be going on. Keep this in mind, too. And I'm not talking about any particular BYU player. I'm talking about in general terms around the country. There are a lot of players that transfer for very good reasons of their own. There are players that transfer because the coaches have decided that they're not the fit that they thought, and the coaches invite those players to continue their college career elsewhere. So there's all kinds of things happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. There may be NIL money that was expected that wasn't delivered, and guys say, okay, you broke your promise, I'm out of here. I'm not pointing to any particular school, any particular player. What I am saying is that it's hard to judge players for their decisions to leave based on the superficial information that we know. And if Clark decides he wants to go play with his brother Campbell for a year of college football, and there's nothing else involved, that's a fair decision.
Trevor, as BYU pushes to Power 5 status and the Big 12, and with the quarterback in flux, whether it's Jaren Hall or another high-level quarterback that comes out of the transfer portal, combined with some of the assets that you just talked about that BYU brings back on the offensive line and in some other places, what are your way too early expectations for BYU in year one of the Big 12?
Very competitive in year one in the Big 12 if the quarterback situation gets resolved. If Jaren Hall comes back and he's healthy, or if they're able to get a guy from the transfer portal or that hotshot freshman that comes in that's able to carry this offense, because the offensive line will be good. There's strong running back room, a lot of outstanding young up-and-coming wide receivers. This offense should move. And we saw, I think, a glimpse of what the defense can be when they attack in the bowl game. I mean, they did stuff that just almost made me fall off my chair against SMU. I mean, they ran zone blitzes. They were bringing corners for pass blitzes, corners on run blitzes. They were doing different things that we haven't seen a whole lot of this year. And it was successful in holding down one of the best offenses, certainly one of the best passing offenses in college football, those SMU Mustangs. And so I think that combination will make them competitive just like it is. I think that combination will make other recruits and transfer portal potential guys want to come play for BYU, especially on defense, because defensive players want to attack. And I would just suggest that you go look at the Louisville-Cincinnati bowl game. I think it was the Fenway Bowl, right? The Wasabi Fenway Bowl, where Louisville, they both had interim coaches, et cetera. Louisville's defense decided, we're just going to go get them. We're just going to go attack like crazy. And they did, and they won. And it was fun to watch, and it was fun for them to play. BYU is transitioning into that kind of style right now. And I think it all adds up to the ability to maximize their potential. And that's what they'll need to do to be competitive in the Big 12 in their first year.
We may not want to hear it, but BYU's defense is trying to be like Utah's defense. And Utah's defense has been awesome for a decade plus. But the influences of Kalani and Jay Hill and others are certainly strong with those defenses up there with Kyle Whittingham. Okay, let's finish with this. Next year, BYU enters the Big 12. We don't know the schedule yet. We thought we'd get it in December. Sounds like it might wait until February with Texas and Oklahoma, maybe leaving after a year in flux, blah, blah, blah. Don't know the quarterback situation. Don't know everybody going in the NFL. Do you have a standard for BYU next year and an expectation higher than make a bowl game?
Yes. The standard is, make a bowl game, definitely. Although we talk about Sam Houston as one of the non-conference games next year. Sam Houston is nationally known for being a high-flying offense. I mean, that is not a cupcake. So BYU fans shouldn't look at that as a runway heading into the rest of the schedule. Sam Houston is tough. At the same time, I think BYU, my expectation for them is to get everything out of the potential that they have. They're going to run into teams that may have more talent top to bottom. They're going to run into teams that have got a lot of momentum. What I want to see, though, is BYU's athletes in position doing the right things with the right technique, with fury, with violence, and with precision. And then when you make contact with the opponent, and things start to break down, then the opponent has something to say with what happens. But I want to see them maximize everything that they've got and then let the chips fall where they may. How many wins that turns into, I'm not sure in the first year. I have high expectations. I'd love to see them get to 8 wins in their first year in the Big 12. That would be an amazing accomplishment, I believe. But at the same time, they might win more. They might win less, but it's that competitive fire and the technical precision that I want to see out of them in their first year in the Big 12. That is my expectation.
I love it. I think you just explained the way you played the game, Trevor, with fury, violence, and precision.
Hey, I was coached by Roger French and Mel Olson. There was no other way.
I love it. Trevor, thanks for the time. We'll do it again soon, and we look forward to BYU's recruiting class that we can break down next week.
Thanks, guys.
Trevor Matich back with us on BYU Sports Nation. Before we go to break, a little bit of breaking news. This dealing with the other football, as an FUTBOL. Brecken Mozingo of BYU Women's Soccer named a College Soccer News third-team All-American. Mozingo had a breakout season, 12 goals, 10 assists. She was awesome. Here's what's super fun for BYU women's soccer fans. They're bringing back basically everybody as they move into the Big 12 and will be an immediate prospect to win the Big 12 conference in year one.
Elite Eight, let's go.
Let's go,
Take
man.
down TCU
Everybody's back, basically.
Okay, tomorrow we've got a special BYU Sports Nation. It's football signing day. We've got you covered. Exciting group of new guys, lots of impact performers even next season. It's not the typical, like, hey, in 5 years they'll start to contribute, right? After a mission in a couple of years. No, big-time stuff. We're excited about it tomorrow at noon Eastern.
Plus, and I say this in the spirit of Mike Leach and some ideas that he has so geniusly presented, if a Wildcat can beat a Bull, should a Cougar be worried about said Wildcat? This is BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by The BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Trio Orem Senior Living believes in empowering seniors to live life to the fullest. We help eliminate stress out of daily life when you live at Trio. Less time focusing on housework means you can socialize at one of our many events. With safety in mind, of course. And did we mention our spacious apartments with modern amenities? Learn more about setting up a private tour at trioorum.com.
Hi, Lauren Daigle here.
It's John Legend here.
Hi, everybody. It's Kristen Chenoweth.
Kelly O'Hara here.
Merry Christmas from all of us at BYUtv.
Merry Christmas from everyone at BYUtv.
Happy holidays from everyone at BYUtv.
Merry Christmas from all of us here at BYUtv.
Merry Christmas from all of us at BYUtv.
Happy holidays from everyone at BYUtv.
What up? This is BYU Sports Nation. Follow the program on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok.
He is Jarom. I am Spencer. Let's whip it. The Cougar Whip Around presented by Maersk, your e-commerce logistics shipping partner.
Okay, men's hoops. Last night, Weber State beat Utah State. They're in the same town of Ogden.
What?
You worried about Thursday night now? Cougars and Wildcats?
I was already worried about Thursday night. I'm worried about tonight.
You're worried about tonight?
A little bit. Because of the emotional high, like what happens so often to so many teams, especially young teams. Okay, you kind of ride the wave and the emotion of who you're playing, and it's not going to be nearly as exciting tonight as it was on Saturday against Utah. Can BYU maintain the energy level that they had against Utah against Lindenwood? No, there will be somewhat of a drop-off. If BYU shoots 3 for 20 from the three-point line, they can lose to anybody. We've seen that against Idaho State. We've seen it against South Dakota State. Certainly they didn't shoot well against Utah Valley, lost by 15 at home. Yeah, like BYU needs to show me that they can get it done and maintain that high energy level after some big opponents and handle business against a team they should beat on paper, right?
Yeah, BYU's played 11 D1 teams. Only one game has been not single digits.
Crazy.
Nickels. Tonight will be the second. BYU will handle Lindenwood, but it certainly makes you pause because Weber State has lost to some weird teams. They beat unbeaten Utah State on the road in the Spectrum. That was quite the performance. They were down 18 at one point, Spence.
I know.
18 in the game. I know.
Utah State down 18 on their home floor.
Yeah, no, Weber State was down 18.
Also, I was already worried about Weber State. Now, like, yeah, for sure. This just doubles down. Like, BYU's got to bring it every game. They're capable of anything.
Yeah, BYU's got to make the NIT. Like, at least that.
They got to beat Weber State if they want to do that.
Yeah.
Last night on Monday Night Football, our guy Steve Young, former Utah quarterback Alex Smith, and RG3, all in a roundabout way, put blame on New York Jets head coach Robert Saleh for mismanagement of the Zach Wilson situation. Is the Zach Wilson scenario in New York more on Coach Saleh or more on Zach?
I think it's more on Zach. His play has been the number one thing here. He certainly can play better. And what he said in the postgame got him benched. It wasn't just the play, it was the combination of those two. Could Robert Saleh have done something better to manage it? Not much. He had to say he chose the team over Zach in that moment. And this team is in competition for a playoff spot. You can't dork around in that situation. I think he made the right move, and Zach has an opportunity again on Thursday night and another start.
Now, it is interesting because I tend to agree with you that the right decision was made in the moment based on what happened with that terrible post-game press conference featuring Zach. But I did talk to Steve before the Stanford game, during the Stanford game in Palo Alto, and I asked him about that. I was like, hey, so walk me through why you got fired up on Monday Night Football, and he brought up a great point. He said, it's bigger than just now. Like, I know the Jets are so desperate to get back to the playoffs.
That matters to them.
And be relevant this season. But if you go all in on a number 2 quarterback and the long play, and he's 5-2 as a starter, when he has a good running back that's healthy and his offensive line's not all banged up, you have to consider all those things and not get caught up in the emotions of just what happened in one game or 2 games and the press conference after. And you got to look at the long play, because he said if he benches Zach and Zach doesn't recover from this, then they just wasted another top 2 pick, and now you have to trade him. Like, you have to trade him.
Wasn't this the Jake keeps Riley Nelson situation, though, to some degree? Riley more proven than Mike. But, like, with Jake, the team was not behind Jake. They were behind Riley. And so you had to go with what the team wanted. And you have to save the team in the moment. I agree with Steve, but it wasn't. The team was not behind Zach. They made the shirts for Mike. They were clearly out for Mike, supporting him. I understand why Robert Saleh made that move to go, hey, I got to save this group.
Are the
not
Jets
just
that
the
much better with
individual.
Mike White, though? That's the thing. Like, and there are some fair points being brought up on social media where it's like, you know, Mike White had a bad game his last game, and Zach Wilson, statistically speaking, had a better game than Mike White. But fans of the New York Jets are so much more willing to, like, embrace and accept Mike White's inadequacies.
Well, because you're paying Zach a lot more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like,
So
because you paid him a lot,
yeah.
why not see it out? If it doesn't work out the rest of the season,
Because you want to make the play.
then go.
Because you're right there.
Well, Mike White
Don't
could
lose
have
to the Lions.
Could have helped him, you know, in a couple of scenarios, get to one win closer to the playoffs, and he didn't.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Isaac Rex is returning. Big get, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yes. Bring back your amazing tight end who we think and feel is an NFL prospect. I'd like him to catch more than 23 passes a year, especially when you have 6 touchdowns in those 23 catches all season. Like, I want Isaac Rex to catch 40 plus.
Find this man.
He's good enough that he deserves more targets and more receptions. Isaac Rex could be a 50-catch guy. Why not? Why not have him be like Michael Mayer at Notre Dame and be a focal point of this BYU offense? He's that good. His hands are that good. He's a really good blocker. He's a fantastic teammate. I love that he's coming back. I just want him to be more of a focal point in the offense.
I think Michael and Isaac are different types of tight ends. I think Isaac's certainly very talented. Michael's like a first-round dude. Isaac hopefully is a draft pick after next year. But a bit of news just to interrupt here that Weber State is probably going to hire OC Mickey Mental to be the head coach, which means BYU...
Not to be confused with Mickey Mantle.
Yeah, which that means BYU's likely to retain Fesi Satake and Steve Clark on offense, which is great news. Because that was in question, right?
He's not going anywhere. BYU women's volleyball finishes 18th in the final coaches poll. Is number 18 a fair final ranking?
Yeah, BYU 1-6 versus ranked teams in the final poll. They beat Washington State and finished 24th. They didn't get any of those other kind of big wins to catapult them any higher. So BYU is a top 20 program, tremendous. 2018, they were number 1 for most of the year, made the Final Four. Hopefully BYU starts to climb back into that kind of top 10, and we'll see what San Diego brings back next year.
Yeah, can BYU...
Excuse me, BYU's going to the Big 12, of course. Bye.
I was going to say, can BYU...
Who cares what San Diego brings back?
Find something in the transfer portal like San Diego did to help them make the transition into Big 12
I would
play.
love that. What's interesting about volleyball and soccer, Spence, is unlike football and men's basketball, BYU is primarily members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Sure.
A lot from Utah, a lot from California, and that works to put them in the top 20. That would never really work for men's basketball and football if they only went after those guys. You have to supplement the roster with all kinds of talent from all kinds of backgrounds in football and men's basketball. But volleyball and soccer do not require that type of recruiting currently. The Big 12 does not change who BYU recruits very much in those two sports.
BYU women's volleyball's got another great recruiting class. I think they're one piece away from being a top 10 team. One major piece.
One pin hitter.
Yes.
Granted, you're replacing Heather Knighting, but you're excited about Kate Pryor.
All right.
Okay, what kind of impact do you expect Ellie Walbrook to have on the women's soccer team? Speaking of.
The rich get richer, Jarom. I don't know. To be frank, I feel like BYU women's soccer's already in a great place with who they bring back, and they figured out their rotations and which players they need in which spots. If BYU is an A+ right now, they get, like, Ellie Walbrook makes them an A++. Like, it's great. It's another fantastic weapon that Jennifer Rockwood has to work with.
She could play one of the 3 attacking positions. Rachel McCarthy was good, but they wanted her to be better as the number 9, score more goals. Perhaps Ellie plays in one of those spots, but you need depth in women's soccer. You play like 14.5, so it's going to be awesome no matter where she fits.
We saw 2 freshmen that were awesome last year. Allie Fryer was fantastic.
Yeah, she's going to be awesome.
Right? This is the rich get richer for BYU women's soccer, and I love
Never
it.
concerned about soccer and volleyball recruiting.
It appears it will be a cold, frigid, miserable December weekend for many NFL teams, and frankly for some Cougars in the NFL. Field Yates points out current estimates for the feels-like temperature at kickoff in some of the outdoor games this Saturday. Bills-Bears, -11. Seahawks-Chiefs, -6.
Jeez.
Saints-Browns, -9. Texans-Titans, 5 degrees. Balmy. Falcons-Ravens, 7 degrees. And Raiders-Steelers, -4.
Yikes.
Should Taysom Hill, speaking of Tyler Allgeier's projected 7-degree kickoff temperature, be jealous of that scenario because he's got to play in -9 in Cleveland?
No, it's going to be cold for everybody, but hopefully Tyler Allgeier does his thing again like he did last week.
Run the ball in the cold.
Burr.